Okay, let's see the second activity. Let's discuss the rest of the things that we told you inside the lab. So we have took the selectors. We have a tag, a class, an ID. We have seen all these things, and this is how you can put things internally as a style tag, and finally you have things as external style sheets using the link here, and this is the dominance scale, right? Alright, so that was the first activity. Let's take a look on the second one. For the second one, we're gonna go through a little bit of the most famous and most commonly used CSS rules. Alright, so let's take a look at the second activity. I think I have this open already. So it's about centering things in the middle and giving more CSS rules to what we have done so far. So this is, let me just try to go there. This is what we've done so far. I'm just going to stop the server and run it again. Alright, and let me go to the lab activity. This one, where is it? Activity 1. This is what we did. Now we are willing to achieve this. Alright, so let's see. Let's start with, I'm just going to copy all of our work here, and I'm just going to go to my folder. I'm going to create another folder here, activity 2, and I'm just going to paste this file inside of it. It doesn't seem to work, so I'm just going to make another folder called activity 2 HTML. Right, so let me just paste this there. That's activity 2. I'm going to use the same styles from there, and I'm just going to name it something different as say styles activity 2.css. Alright, let me just paste all of these here. Okay, and that's essentially it. Now we need to copy the image as well and paste it there. Now we have all the same setup here. Okay, so illustration 2 is all about buttons and paddings and fonts, right? So how can we figure out how can we center things? Let's start by centering things horizontally. Okay, or let's just take it as it is here. Let's say we are going to start with buttons and paddings and fonts and stuff like that. So in this script, before I get to the activity 2, I'm just going to illustrate how can we create a button. Well, you can just create a button using a tag called button like this, and it's gonna have two attributes. One by default is called type, and the other one is called name. This name attribute is so important. You will not feel its importance now, but whenever we get to the forms video, it's going to be really important. But for the time being, you can just leave it as it is, and you can notice that this small button has been created, but it doesn't contain anything. So let's put some words, something like me, and let's give it some styling. Let's give it a class here. Let's say that this is going to be having a class of button. Okay, and I'm just going to create two of them. Notice how they are stacking in line. So this is an inline level element. All right, now let me create a new external file here. So this is going to be styles for illustration 2. Alright, so let me just go, and this folder is where I'm working in. So I'm just going to create styles illustration 2 .css. Okay, and I'm going to hold for a minute. I'm going to hold this activity 2 for a while. We want just to discuss a little bit of things from here. Then we are going to modify what we have done in activity 1 in the activity 2 folder. But for now, let's just focus on the illustration here. Okay, so in illustration 2, let's say that this button that we have just created, I'm just going to grab the class, and let me just change the color to be something like white. Notice how the text now is white, right? And let's give it a background color all of these CSS rules has been seen before, so nothing is really new here. And Control Alt C, and let's start and pick something that is really strong here. Okay, notice that there is some kind of a border, right? We don't really like that. If you don't understand what do I mean by a border, you can visually see that there is some kind of border. If you want to make sure that there is a border, let's just go to our developer tools, and let me just go back in my live server here and go to illustrations. This is where I'm working right now, right? So Control Shift I, right? And let's take a look at the buttons. Right click and inspect element. This is the button, and notice that by default it has some stuff that maybe like we don't really need it, like it has border and stuff, border style and border color. We can change all this, but take a look at this. Whenever you hover over this element in the middle, which corresponds to the width, the actual width of the text, right? So this is the text or the content width, right? In blue. See, it's highlighting in blue whenever I stop in this blue part here. Okay, so it's telling you that it has a width. The content itself, the text itself, is having a width of 51. That's really important to understand, because whenever we get to centering things horizontally, this is going to be playing a very major part. So the content here, this is in the case of this button, it's not going to be the same for the rest of the elements, but for the case of a button tag or a button element, see, it's going to tell you that it has a content width of 51. It has a slight padding. If you're seeing here, it's in green. I'm not really sure that you're seeing this. So it's in green. You see this? This is green, right? So it has a padding top of 1 pixel and a wide padding bottom of 1 pixel as well. Not sure if you can really see it or not. Okay, that's the default things, the default padding that comes with a button, right? And a padding is not more, it's just an internal spacing, right? So the padding is an internal spacing, meaning that within the element itself we can increase the height of the area above the content and the area underneath the content and right of the content and left of the content. So this is padding. It's just internal spacing within the tag, within the element itself. And here it happens that we have inside the element itself, inside the button itself, we have a padding of 1 pixel above and at bottom, and we have on the sides, right and left, we have 6 pixels here and 6 pixels there. And if we stood on the border here, we're gonna see that there is a small hover, a light hover. So that's the border. So we have a border of 2 pixels all around the places, from top, bottom, right, left. And if you stood on the margin, there is nothing in the margin. It doesn't have any margins. And margins are basically external spaces, meaning that outside of that button, outside of that element, do I have any spacing like between me and the next element, which is the next button? Or do I have any spacing above of this button, like with the previous element, which is basically this HR? Do I have any spacing underneath this element? So it's external spacing, as you're going to see in a minute. All right, so let's say that I'm going back to my editor here. All right, and I'm going to say this is going to be button 1, just to illustrate what I'm saying, and this is going to be button 2. Okay, so let's say that this is button 1. I made them both button 2. All right. So let's change the padding, which is the internal spacing. Let's give it a padding top of 5 pixels. See, it increased from there, from the top. That's the internal spacing from within the button itself, right? So that's another 10. Let's say something like 30 pixels. That's really huge. So this is an internal spacing thing, right? And we can say padding from the top, padding from the bottom as well of 30 pixels, and we have padding from the right. Okay, notice that you can make from the 4 positions or from the 4 directions. So this is bottom, and this is going to be right, and this is going to be left. Okay, so this is the padding. All right, let's have it from the right and left, something a little bit extreme, which is going to be 60 pixels. Okay, and the pixels here are the unit for a fixed size, whatever you're talking about. If it's padding, width, pixel is just a fixed unit of measurement, right? So that's our button right there. Okay, now instead of all of this, you can say the following. You can say something like this. If you want to type a 2-parameter kind of thing for the batting, you want just to type 2 numbers instead of 4 values, you can limit it to 2 numbers as follows. You can say that the first parameter is going to be for top and bottom. So from top and bottom, we want it to have 30 pixels. And the second parameter is going to be for the right and left. From right and left, we can give it something like 60 pixels. If you did something like that, you can like skip all of these. So this is like a shorthand of doing things, and it's gonna give you the same result. If you want to stick to the greatest abbreviation of all of them, like having only 1 parameter instead of having 2, then you can do that. Instead of having 2 values, right? It really depends on the use case that you have. Okay, so if I want to have only 1 value here, so I can say something like 30 pixels, but this is going to be unifying everything, like 30 pixels from up, right, and to the bottom and left, right? So maybe this is not going to be as specific as you're going to need it in your project, but this is just a way of them, right? You can also have the padding written in 4 values or 4 parameters as follows. It's going to be clockwise, so from the top we can give it something like 30 pixels, right? Clockwise, so from the right, now we can give it something like 60 pixels, right? And from the bottom, we can give it something like 30 pixels as well, right? So this is top, right, bottom, and finally clockwise. What's left is the left direction, and that's going to be another 60 pixels. So these are right and left, and this is top and bottom. All right. Personally, I really prefer this one over all of these. Okay. What you're going to be using most of the time is this one and this one, the 2-parameter thing and the 4-parameter padding technique. Okay. So this is the padding. I'm just going to delete all of this, and let's have some margin. What do you think? The margin is the same thing. You can do like 4 values, 2 values. You can have margin top, left, bottom, and right if you want to be more specific. Okay, and the margin is just external spacing. So let's say that I want to have an external space between this element and whatever on the right of it, which is happen to be another button element, right? So I can say that to the right, I can give something like 60 pixels or 40 pixels. Okay, see, this is an external spacing. If I went now to my developer tools and Control-Shift-I and instead in this guy and inspect element, you're gonna see that now we have a margin of 50 pixels. You see this 50 pixels here? This is the one that we've added. And these are the paddings that we have all as well added, right? So we have added from the top and bottom 30, right and left 60. So how would this make sense to you? Okay. Now let's add some more margins. Let's say that I'm going to have a margin top of, for example, something like 30 pixels between me and the break line or the HR. And notice that once we know that we have something as margin top and margin bottom, we can really neglect the use of BRs. We don't really need to have BRs in our HTML script. We can use that from CSS using margin top and bottom, right? So this is margin top and bottom. Let's say from the left, we are going to have another 50 pixel, or you know what, let's just use the shorthand and we'll just say something like this. This is going to be my margin. From the top is going to be 50 pixels, and from the right is going to be something like 30 pixels. All right, and from the bottom is going to be another 50 pixels, and from the left is going to be another 30 pixels. Okay, so this is our margin and padding. Notice that there is a border that you might not want to have. If you want to specifically override the border that comes by default with the button, which looks really ugly by the way, if you want to change it, you can say that the border typically have 3 parameters. It has the thickness, which can be something like 1 pixel, 10 pixels, whatever you want. So 1 typically does the trick. So this is going to be 10 pixels. What is the style of the border? Do you want it to have it as solid or dashed, or what do you want the border to be looking like? And finally, the color of the border. So let's say the color is going to be something like red. That is a very bad choice. Let's say blue, right? It's it's not the most pretty, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but like it works. Okay, and this is dashed. Okay, so this is if you want to have a border, right? Maybe you would want to have the thickness a little bit reduced. No, that's way too reduced. Okay. In my case, I do not want to have a border at all. So let's just say that this is going to be none. Okay. So we don't have a border. There is something called border radius. Okay, so border radius was literally having angles, right? Giving some kind of a diameter for every angle, right? So if we say like we would want to like create an angle here of a diameter of some kind of a half a circle or a quarter of a circle in each corner. So let's say that in each corner we would want to have a radius of, for example, 10 pixels. So see, this is how it looks like. The more you increase it, it's gonna be looking like this, alright? So that's the border radius, and I'm just going to have it as 10. I think 10 is acceptable for me. Okay, and we can play with the font size as well. Let's say that the font size is going to be something like 18 pixels. And notice how whenever you make the font size bigger, the the size of the whole element gets bigger with you. Okay, so let's just make this 20 pixels. Okay, we have another attribute that is called font style, and font styles can be italic, it can be normal, it's really up to you. So I'm just going to choose italic here. And let's say that we have another thing called font family. We've shown you font family before, I believe. So these are one of the default fonts that you're gonna find in any machine. So I'm just gonna pick monospace here because I like this font, right? And there is font, or what's called a text transform. So that's text transform, that you can have it capitalize the first letter or lowercase or uppercase. So I'm just gonna pick uppercase here, and let's have it have a font weight. So you have bold and you have normal and you have some values, like these are numeric values, right? And I think these values for most of the fonts are going to make sense. They are going to get to be bold starting 400, I believe, or above 400. So starting 500, no, 600. Yeah, starting 600, you're gonna have this being bold. So that is equivalent to just writing bold like that, right? And what else do we have? We have something called text decoration, and that's basically, let's say that you want to have an overline like this, or a line through, or maybe something like an underline, right? And you can really decorate this underline the way that you want. Let's say that this underline needs to be more decorated, so I'm just going to add wavy, right? So that's a wavy underline, and I'm going to give it some kind of a color here. That's going to be purple of some sort, right? So it really is, it's proportional to the font size. So if you made this bigger, the underline is going to be bigger with you. Okay, so these are just one of the most famous CSS rules that you need to know. Okay, there is another thing that I need all of you to know, which is basically something called the Universal Selector. So this is the Universal Selector, and basically it selects everything in your script. So that's the asterisk. And let's say that in this asterisk, most of the time, I personally, when I use it, I give it some kind of a font family to everything. So I'm just going to pick a font family to give everything. We can choose Verdana or cursive or whatever. So this is how you can apply some specific CSS rule to everything across your HTML script. Okay, so what happens if you want to maybe have a specific kind of font that is not one of the defaults on the machine, right? You do not like the default fonts on the machine, so you can use something called font or Google fonts. So let's just search for Google fonts, and let's search for something called Lato. That is, let's just search for Google fonts, right? You're gonna have so many fonts here. So Pick whatever you want. Roboto is one of the most famous one, and the Lato as well. So let's go for, and Montserrat. Montserrat is really beautiful. So I'm just gonna pick Montserrat here, and pick whatever suits you here. I'm going to pick one that is bold, this one, medium 500, and select this style. And you can see that there's a link to put in your HTML script. So I'm just going to pick this and copy it. And just like any link tag, we're going to put this link underneath our link that we have already previously established to link our external style sheet. So I'm just going to place this underneath. So these are basically two links. These are actually two links. This is the first and this is the second. Okay, and notice that now you can use the font family Montserrat with a weight that is, I think, starts from 500. Okay, so I can say that the font family is going to be Montserrat, right? And notice that whenever you are using a font that is not one of the defaults on the machine, you need to wrap it between double quotes. So I'm just going to pick Montserrat here, and it is going to be changed. And notice that really this depends on the internet connection. So if you don't have an internet connection, or maybe it's weak on the client side, maybe the user or the client who's opening this website has a very bad internet connection, the fonts maybe are going to have some time until it appears, right? So in a case like this, you need to have some kind of a rollback font. So you can have a rollback font or a font that you can go back to if the first one did not work, by doing just like this, putting a comma. And let's say that if we didn't find anything, if this font was not available, maybe in Google, maybe it was removed from Google Fonts repository, maybe the client doesn't have enough internet connection or sufficient internet connection to load the font, we're just gonna have a rollback font like that, right? And this button, typically we are using monospace, so we are overriding that font with our own font, right? So that's why you are seeing this is monospace, but all of the rest of the fonts are just Montserrat. And you can keep on getting fonts from Google Fonts like that. You can just search for I don't know, let's say maybe this is beautiful, Roboto Mono. So let's just go to Roboto Mono here, and I'm going to pick the first one. So yeah, let's pick the first one. I've already picked it. Oh, okay, all right. So that's, let me just go back again. So this is Roboto Mono, select, yeah, that's Roboto Mono. Okay, so this is the link for it. I needed to expand this, I didn't notice that. So you can take the link from here. Alright, and we can go to our HTML page and place it there, right? And now I can use this Roboto Mono font. Okay, so let's say that here I'm not going to use monospace, I'm going to use the Roboto Mono. Okay, so it looks like that. Okay, and maybe we would have a rollback of monospace, and that's it. All right. Alright, let's do the same thing for the second button. Okay, and let's continue with our work. So I'm just going to take this and let's go to activity 2, and I'm going to preview this activity 2 guy here. And before we start anything, before the link, or maybe after the link, alright, so you can just put the buttons here. Okay, let's have the buttons there. Okay, and some HR, maybe another BR. Alright, that is not enough, so another BR. Okay, so let's just go there and grab this. And let us see styled activity. Let's say that we have now a styled activity 2, and let's just close all of these. and this is styles activity 2. Let's just put that button styling that we have made. Let's grab that universal selector and put it at the top here. Alright, so this is going to be the same thing as the one that I've made and I told you to make in the lab here, in the lab instructions. I've just added 2 buttons at the beginning. Okay, so let's just make these buttons a little bit smaller, and I've like noticeably you can see that I've changed the font. This font is not the same. I've just used the one that I've took from Google Fonts, right? So here let's just make the font size a little bit smaller so we can see what's going on here, and let's just make the paddings as well smaller. So let's just say this is going to be 20, and this is, or maybe this is going to be 30 and that's 20. Okay, and let's take away that radius. I don't really think that I'm going to need it. The same thing with the decoration, just I wanted to show you, that's it. Alright, so let's just minimize that and let's get on with the activity 2. Now the activity 2 is all about centering things in the middle. Let's just handle this first. So let's just make some kind of a fixed width, right? Or let's talk about centering things in the middle first. Alright, so let me just open up my live server here, because I think this is going to be better on the live server. So that is the live server. Let's just go back and pick lab activity, activity 2, and activity 2, like that. Alright, so let's start with centering the easiest things to go, which is basically this H1. Okay, now before we start, I want you to think about 2 things. If we want to center things in the middle, right? Let me just indent these guys. Alright, so centering things in the middle, you need to think about 2 things. I'm going to write them there. Alright, centering things horizontally in the center or in the middle of the screen. Okay, first of all, if this element is a block level element, is it a block level element or is it an inline? You need to ask yourself this question. Okay, if it's a block level element, then the first thing that you would want to try doing is basically try doing the text aligned center. If this worked, then good for you. If it didn't, we're gonna see what we can do next. So let's start with text align center, right? As you're seeing, text align center only applies on text. All right, so that's a very important note. So let's just grab that H1 and let's say here, I think we have already targeted the H1 before. Yeah, that was this one. Okay, and let's say text align center, and let's take a look here. It got centered. Why is that? The reason for this, if we went to the developer tools here, I'm just going to dock this in the bottom so you can see what I am dealing with. So this is the H1. Okay, if you take a look at the H1, you're gonna see that the H1 is by default a block level element. And why is that? Because its width is literally taking the whole screen, as you're seeing here. Okay, and the content width, which is the blue one, that's the most important part, by the way. The content itself is not only confined on the text, like the content does not start from the W until the E. That's not the only content. The content is spanning the whole width of the viewport, or the view width. Okay, and since you have something like that, it's really easy to align whatever inside that content in the middle. So if you have a block level element that has a width of, like, the content width, which is the highlighted in blue, right? If you have a block level element that has a content width of the whole screen, then just use text align center. That's your first thing that you need to think of, right? If it works, then good for you. Now let's do the width part. Okay, so let's limit the width. Let's say that the width here is something like 500 pixels, If this did not satisfy you, you can always come there and see this 500 pixel. Let me just use my scroller of the mouse here, or you know, using the up arrow, and see whatever suits you. So let's say that 660 is really looking good. And I think you've noticed something. The minute that we have changed the width, it didn't become centered in the screen, in the middle of the screen anymore, right? So what happened here? What is happening is that the text align center is centering the content, which happens to be this text, right? Because it's text align center, so it is centering the content within the width that we have given. So previously, when we had the width of the entire screen by default, right, text align center centered the content inside that width. When we changed the width to be something fixed, now the same rule applies. The text was aligned in the center, but within the width that we have changed, within the 660 pixels. Okay, so how can we put it in the middle? Now here comes the most important and most interesting part. See, that's the content, right? And this is there's no padding. Since this is the content of 606 pixels, I don't know if you're seeing this, but it's like 660 pixels, the one that we have settled. Okay, so within the content itself, our text is centered, but not within the page. So if you looked at the margin, you're gonna see that it has a very huge margin, right? So it's having a margin right of literally, I'm not really sure what is the value here, but it's having a very big margin right, maybe something like 600 or maybe 800 pixels. So if we can push it from the left, if we can give it some kind of a margin lift of, like, if we can push it like there, like this, to come in the middle, right? So if we can give it something like 50% of margin left, so it can be pushed into the middle of the screen, and we can give it from the right, instead of all of this margin right that you're seeing, if we can give it something like 50% from the margin right as well, you're gonna see it centered in the middle, right? You're gonna see the whole element centered in the middle, right? So let's start using this. So we can say something like margin from the left, I'm going to give it something like 50%. And that's really equivalent to saying margin right or margin left auto, right? You're gonna see that that didn't quite work because we need to give it a margin right as well. We can make sure, we want to make sure that it is from the right, it's taking the margin that is going to center it exactly in the middle, right? So now I want to give it margin right as well, which is 50%, which is auto, and this is going to be doing the trick for us. So that actually what we did is that after we specified a specific width, right, we give a margin right of 50% and we give a margin left of 50%. That's how you center things horizontally. Okay, so going back to our scheme here, or our plan, if it's a block level element, which happens, we're talking about the first one was an H1, it happens to be a block level element. Let's try to text, or using text align center, let's see if it's going to work. And this is going to work within the content area, which is typically highlighted in blue, right? Not within the page area, right? So this is going to work within the content area, not within the screen area. Okay, so in order to center the whole thing, not only the text inside that element, but the element itself inside, centered inside the whole screen, right? We need to give it something more. We need to give it, first of all, a fixed width, right? And the minute that you give a fixed width, you're gonna see that the element will literally go to the left of the screen, and is going to be having a very large margin right. And after we give a fixed width, we just want to give a margin of 0 auto. So what is margin 0 auto? Margin 0 auto, remember, the first parameter is top and bottom. The second one is left and right. And the one that we've used is margin left and margin right. Both of them were auto, right? So if you do not want to have any margin from the top or the bottom, you can just take away these guys and just say I'm not really interested in having margin top and margin bottom, so I'm just going to give this like 0 pixels or just 0. And from left and right, and this is the most important part, I'm going to give it like an auto, so it's going to be the same thing. Okay, if you are interested in, if you want to have some margin to the top and the bottom, you can just increase this 0. You can just make it something like this, whatever. Give it like 30 pixels from up and bottom. That's totally your call, all right? So that's it. What really matters is the left and the right. So this is what we've done. The first step is to check, is this element a block level element or an inline level element? Well, it's a block level element. So let's start with text align. And let's see, do we need to give a fixed size? If we needed to give a fixed size, you're going to see that things will not be centered anymore. It's going to be taken to the right or to the left most of the screen. So we give a fixed size or a fixed width, and then we use margin left, right, auto. Okay? So let's try the same thing on the buttons here. All right? Let's try the same thing on the buttons here. So let's say that button 1 and button 2 are going to be going through the same thing. But hold on a minute. Button 1 and button 2, they are both inline level elements. And you can tell because they are next to each other. And you can also tell because if you use the developer tools, you're going to see that the button 1 and button 2, they are literally having the space of the content and the margin that we give them. They do not go a new line, as you're seeing here. They are next to each other. So if it was an inline level element, and that's the new plan, if it wasn't inline, then we are going to do the following. First, we are going to convert it into a block level element using something called display block. And we've seen this inside the lab, right? So let me just use display block on both of the buttons right there, right? So let's say display and block. All right, so that is the first step. And once you say display block, it's going to be behaving as a block. How would it behave as a block? By having the width of the entire screen, so it can go a new line like after it finishes. So after it finishes, it goes a new line. The second one, after it finishes, it goes a new line. So this is a block level element now because we use display block on it, all right? After we use a display block, let's try to center things in the middle. So let's try the one that we know that this is our first thing to think of, right? So text align center. You're not gonna see that this is doing anything to you because typically we do not have any width. So if I went to this button and just removed that text align center, there's nothing different. Remove it, nothing is different. Okay, why is that? Because literally, if you hovered over this button, you're gonna see that this is the width. That's exactly the content. That's exactly the content width. Okay, so the content width is literally the text inside. So the text does not have any place to be centered in to begin with. That's all the area that the text, which is click me, is having. There is nothing more to the right or to the left. That's the only highlighted area, the highlighted blue area that it has. Unlike the H1 here, the H1 had all of these. All of these were actually content width. All of this highlighted in blue. All of this is the content width. So the text "Welcome to my first website," it has so many space. It can be aligned to the right, aligned to the left, aligned to the center. So if I went to this H1 and I removed the one that we've used for text align center, you're going to see that it has so much space. The text has so much space of the content width to move around, right? I'm going to set this back. Okay, so this is unlikely to happen in the button because as you're seeing here, the button is literally having the content width, or the text which is click me is literally having the content width just as it is. There is no extra space that we can use to align things in the middle or in the right or to the left. So text align center doesn't work that good in this case. So I'm just going to take this away. Okay, so the text is already centered in the middle in the button case, but we need to take the whole button and put it in the middle. And how can we do that? Well, the same thing. You're seeing here that the margin to the right is really huge. Like all of this is margin right? So we can just divide the margins to the left and to the right to make them 50% or auto. So you can just say margin 0 auto, and boom, you have it like there. Okay, but this 0, all right, this 0 margin, because of it, they are stacking like literally over each other. So you can just increase the margin top and bottom to have it something like 20 pixels. Okay, so this is looking good so far. Now let's try to work on the links here. Okay, so let's go to the link, which was, we never actually referenced the or styled any of the links. So the first link is I think it is where is it? Yeah, this one. So let's say that we are going to grab the links. Okay, and notice that the links by default, they are in line level element. Okay, they are in line level element. So let's just stand on this. This is in line. Okay, because it's just literally having the width of the text that's in line. Okay, but we happen to have a BR after it, so it's not looking that in line. But if we remove the break lines, you're just gonna see that now let's say something like after this, or maybe not that one. Where is the first link? That is the first link. So if I remove this, right, and I put anything like a span of anything, they are just going to come next to each other. So the span and the hyperlink are what we call inline. Okay, all right, so let's go back here and let's say that the first thing that we are going to do is to try and use text align center. And I think you can tell now that this is not going to work for one simple reason. If you hovered over this, you're going to see that the content, which is highlighted in blue, is literally confined or limited to the text, right? So that's the text is defining the width. That's the only width that you're getting. Where are you going to center things or put things on the middle, on the right, on the left? There is no space. So we do not have any width to begin with. So, right? So this is the hyperlink. Now let's start. If this text center did not work, let's pick the first of the first option, which is displaying a block level element, right? So let's say that we are going to convert that in line into a block. That's the first thing. And notice that now it's taking the width of the entire screen. But notice something. When we transferred or converted that in line to a block, if you look closely, there are no margins here. So there are no margins. Unlike the button when we converted it into a block, it had like a very huge margin to the right. That's why making margin left auto and margin right auto made sense, right? But in this case of the button, there are no margins. Like stand over the margin here, there are no margins. So if you set something like margin 0 auto, it's not going to do anything. There are no margins to begin with. Okay, but what would really be helpful is that if you commented at that text align center, and this is going to work with you. Let me just have a semicolon here, and this is going to work with you. And why is that? Because after we displayed this as a block, well, it happened that this is by default the content width. This is the content width, the content which is in blue, which is taking the whole screen. So if I have all of this content, like all of this content space, I literally can put this in the middle. That's just text by the end of the day. So you can just use text align center. Things are going to be really beautiful with you until you do something like this, until you do something like width, give it some kind of a 400 pixel, until you give some kind of a fixed width. The minute that you give a fixed width, this is going to show you that now you have some kind of a margin. Okay, so the text within the element, now notice that this is the element area, which is the 500 pixels that we have set, or the 400 pixels that we have set. So within the 400 pixels, which is having to be the content width, which is the one highlighted in blue here, within this area, within the 400 pixels, the text is aligned in the center, but the whole element relative to the screen width is not aligned to the center. So we're going to do the same thing. Now, if you hover, you're going to see that there is a very huge margin. Now we can say margin 0 auto. Okay, so let's just make sure that there is a semicolon, and it's going to be centered in the middle. Okay, so if it's in line, you're gonna display it as a block, right? And if it has a fixed or a large or a screen like width, then just use text align then center. Okay, but if you used fixed width in pixels, then you would need to use, which is the fourth step, margin 0 auto. So this is the plan to center things if this was a block level element or an inline level element, and we've seen the inline in the button and with the anchor tags. Okay, all right, so let's take a look at the rest of them. So we have this paragraph. So let's just say that this paragraph, if you took a look here, this paragraph is all right. So we can use text align center since we have a little bit, see this area here? So we have a little bit of the content which is in blue here. So you can use text align center. So let's start with text align center. So using text align center on this paragraph, we can try this first. Okay, so it is centered in the middle, right? And let's take a look at this guy. Okay, so that was an H2 and this is an H2 as well. So if there are headings, we have done already using, we have centered a heading before, which is H1. So I'm just going to use what I used for centering this heading, which is the H1, for both of them. So for the H1, for the H2, comma, H2, comma, H3, I'm going to center all of them in the middle like that. Okay, so that works. What else do we have? Let me just take a look on the original post. Oh, in the original one, I do not have a paragraph. All right, that's fine. And now to the list. So the ordered list, where is the ordered list? That's the ordered list. The ordered list is a block level element as well. As you're seeing, it's taking the whole width of the screen. So let's do the same trick to the ordered list. Let's say that the ordered list, first of all, let's try and give it a specific width. Let's try to use text align center and see what's going to happen here. Okay, so it got centered in the middle since we have a very huge area for the content width, which is aligned in blue, but stuff aren't really looking beautiful at the right hand side or the left hand side. So let's give it just a center or a fixed width. So instead of this center here, I'm just going to go with a fixed width. So I'm just going to give it something like 600 or 400 pixels. Okay, so that's the width that we have now. Now, after giving a fixed width, you know the drill. Now margin 0 auto. Okay, and everything is centered in the middle. If you feel that is not perfectly centered, you can increase the width like that or decrease it, or you can just say no, text align center is not going to work. So let's think about decreasing the width a little bit without breaking things. So maybe 450 will do the trick. All right, and this is the block quotes as well. Let's do the block quotes. Okay, so I'm just going to add the block quotes here. All right, and let's add the site as well. So the site, it looks like the site is an inline. Yeah, the site is an inline level element. That's why it's not working. Okay, we can just add the paragraph instead of having this p tag. Oh, now the paragraph is having a fixed width. So maybe this is something that you do not want to have, because we have already given the H1 and H2 and H3, we have given them something like a fixed width of 660 pixels. So I'm just going to retract in this move here, and I'm not going to include the paragraph with these guys. I want it to have the whole width. I want the paragraph to have the full width of the screen. So that's it. Now the site one is an inline, so the same stuff that we have done to the anchor tag we can do to the site here. Okay, and that didn't seem to work, so let's take a look. Oh, it worked. All right, that was a little bit slow, but it worked. And finally the image, and the same thing that we have done to the image or the anchor tag we can apply to the image, and here it is. That's it. Okay, all right. Now what is left is a little bit of formatting this h1 and this I think this is an h3. I'm not really sure. So let's just go to the live server and let's say that this guy is going to be, that's the h1. It's going to have a padding of from the top of 20 pixels and bright maybe 40 pixels. Alright, okay, that is working. So let's just give it a border of 2 pixels solid and something that is looking like this. Okay, and the round corners, it's a little bit slow. I'm not sure why is it that slow. Let's say 20 pixels. I think this is looking really similar now. Okay, and what is next? The only thing is to do the HTML logo, which is the same thing. You're gonna give this whatever kind of tag. You can give it something like a background color, an underline, and a border and a border radius. That's it. So this is your activity 2. I just added this buttons here, this part here, just so you know how can we modify or style buttons and center them horizontally.